We are talking about renewables deployment in Europe with Jochen Hauff, the Director of Corporate Strategy at BayWa and the Vice President of SolarPower Europe. Jochen, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
When we talk about all of these ambitious goals that are ahead of us, we are fresh off COP27. We have goals coming out of the UK, the US obviously, and in Europe. What are some of the pitfalls that you as an advocate, but also in industry are watching for and cognizant of that we need to address going forward to make sure we can achieve those goals?
And we have all day.
We do.
Yeah, all right. So, let me prioritize very quickly. One of the pitfalls that certainly comes to mind first, in my view, is the topic of supply chain. And I'm not talking only solar, even though that's the most obvious one, where we, in Europe, but also in the US, have a strong dependency on Asia and most notably China, especially on the wafer side. So that is an issue that I think we've all been aware of, and that with recent events you mentioned is becoming to the forefront. And so that's clearly something we need to do something about as an industry, but also in the policy field. But it's not only the solar supply chain we should be concerned about. We see that our wind OEMs here in Europe are struggling. Their financial results seem surprisingly bad if you look at the opportunity in the market at the same time, and that's because of soaring and unexpected raw material prices and so on that they hadn't reflected in their contractual relationships. So also wind and also battery or transformers are in short supply and have issues. So this requires I would say a combined response by industry and the policymaker.
Well, great segue by you there. What are those policies that we need to see come in the near and long term? The U.S. most recently coming out with a very large package in the Inflation Reduction Act to support manufacturing in that country. Europe has its own measures. What are you watching for, and what would you urge policymakers to do in the near and long term?
Well, you're saying Europe has its own measures, and I would say tell me those, because I don't think that Europe is at anywhere close to the level of industrial policy readiness and willingness like now the US is. I mean, just this week or last week, I think a delegation of Europeans went to the US and said, wait a second, you can't do this. And then, well, the answer is obviously, yes, they can, and they will. And it's now, I think, a wake-up call for European politicians in the national capitals, but also in Brussels, that they will have to move to that field of industrial policy. And they don't like it because that's not what they're about. The European Union is about avoiding that member states apply industrial policy against each other. Yeah, and that's why their industrial policy was almost a swear word. And all of a sudden we see, obviously, China having an industrial policy for many decades, and it's not a secret now the US is turning to it. India is doing similar things, and the Europeans have to come to terms and to get a grasp on how to actually do it. And they will need to make some uncomfortable decisions and leave their starting point that industrial policy is bad. I think they will see we are in a world that is different and that requires new measures. So the policy side has to become comfortable, look at the IRA, see which elements are there. I'm not saying we need the exactly same thing, but we need something that supports both the CapEx investment and the OpEx cost for renewable energy production, manufacturing, in order to do this. And we need to have a framework where member states in Europe can, where it's not a total patchwork of every nation doing it a different way, but where there is some guidance and some alignment. Because what we also don't need is hundreds of small-scale manufacturers in 27 European countries, right? We need larger conglomerates. We need to have scale, and that's now we're coming to the industry response. Industry needs to come together to build that scale and to enable the buildup of scale, because otherwise it will never be cost effective.
Certainly a necessity in this global economy too, with so many different regions putting forth that industrial policy. You don't want it to be adversarial in any means, but you want them to support almost each other in this global effort that we're undertaking, right?
Sure, and I think that's the good thing about keeping a dialogue open also with the U.S. And obviously other befriended areas, economic activity and nations. That yes, if we now all fight for ourselves, likely that's not gonna be the best economic outcome. So keeping doors open and allowing an exchange between areas, but also still having the same focus on getting this done is crucial.
Certainly not only falling on policymakers, though. We know there is responsibility within the industry, within our corporate structures, to also achieve the goals that we have set out through commitments and other strategies. What is the homework of industry and the corporate environment to enable these forces? And what would you share with even your colleagues in this space on where we need to go?
I mean, one thing that is first to really become aware and accept that there is an increased risk. Yeah, it's the supply chain risk, but it's also an increased volatility in energy markets that increase that put pressure on our ability to firstly monitor and assess, and secondly then manage and mitigate these risks. So there is a bit of catch-up. Some people in the company, or in the company, I shouldn't talk about our company, but I think in the sector, and ourselves included, need to still achieve that, come to terms that the years of relentless growth, where it was basically we're doing the good thing and we're doing more of it every year.
It's more than that now.
And we need to step up our game on managing those volatilities and these risk factors, right? And that will then give us the peace of mind, give investors the peace of mind to continue to invest their capital in us, because we manage it well. Yeah, we have to prove that also under increased uncertainty we manage it well, and that will then fuel that massive growth that we have in front of us. I mean, it's the opportunity of a lifetime for everyone in renewable energy, what we see right now, but it comes at a heightened level of risk, and it needs to be addressed with governance structures, with internal governance improvements, process improvements as well. And that's very much the homework. This is not, politicians partly force us. There is all sorts of, ESG and other regulation that is not necessarily from the same motivation, but that has the same effect, that there is an increased data request, increased transparency. Financial investors want more information on the way we are sustainable, and risk is included in that. So there are a couple of policy framework settings that already force us in this direction, and we need to get over complaining about the complexity of all that and just get to work and do it.
Jochen Hauff, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Be sure to join the Enlit community and subscribe to our channels.